welcome to the Coding Channel. Today is the third episode of our C# console application tutorial series for beginners. And in this episode, we are going to talk about the variables and data types in C#. This and more when we come back. In our previous episode, we've talked about how to create a new project using Visual Studio IDE. And at the same time, we've talked about the basic programming syntax of C#. Today, in this episode, we are going to talk about variables and data types. Now, when we talk about a variable is simply a name of memory location which serves as a container for storing data. When we talk about data, it could be your name, it could be your address, it could be your age or your student number, your employee ID, or even your account name or account number. So those are variables that wherein we store the data that could be coming from the user or as an initial value. Now, every time we use the variables, there should be a data type. Every time we declare a variables in not only in C# but also in other programming language, okay, the variables and data types go hand in hand because whenever we declare a variable, there should be a type. Okay, and that data type could be a numeric value or having a decimal point or a floating point values, or is it a string or is it a boolean? So those are an example of data types. Now in C#, there are three main categories of data types. Okay, the first one is the value data types. And we have the predefined or the built-in and then the user-defined. And then also we have pointer and references data type. So the pointer and references, we will talk this in our succeeding episode. But for now, in this episode, we will only tackle the basic one, which is the value data types, okay? And specifically the predefined or the built-in. And speaking of predefined value data types, these are the most common predefined value data types, okay, that I will be featuring or highlighting in this episode. When we talk about numeric or having the negative and positive values, for example, we have int and long. Okay, the only difference is of course the size. So if you're working on a large amount of data, so declare a certain variables, for example, long, or if this value is enough to store, for example, that data, so we use the int. And then for floating point values, those numbers having decimal points, you can use a float or double. The only difference again is the size. Okay, if you want to store, for example, a 6 to 7 decimal digits, so use float. Or if it's more than 7, let's say up to 15 decimal digits, so use a double. Okay, and then if you want to store either true or false, so we can use the bool data type for boolean. Okay, and char or char, for example, if you want to store a single character or letter. And in C#, there is a string data type if you want to store a sequence of characters. Normally, this data type, okay, is surrounded by a double quotes, okay, and single quotes for char. So we will talk about this in our next example. Now, there are some rules in naming variables. The first one is the names can have letters, digits, and underscore. So we have number 1 and then a number 2. Okay, as you can see, I've used the underscore here to separate the letter to a number. And then also you can just combine the number and letters, for example, a number 1. And then we have a student name 1, for example. So I just use the underscore. If you want to separate each word by using the underscore, that is correct. Okay, but you cannot use the dash. Okay, it's only the underscore. And normally I use the this type of a variable name. Okay, wherein, for example, if we have two words or more than one word, the first letter of each succeeding word, you have to capitalize it. Okay, just to highlight that that one is another word. Okay, for example, a student, a grade. Okay, and then another rules in naming a variable. So names must begin with a letter or underscore only. So this one is valid. because we can start with letter underscore. So you cannot have a, for example, if you want to add one there, okay, or 10 there. So that one is incorrect or invalid because the rules is we must begin with a letter or underscore only. Another, name should start with a lowercase letter and it cannot contain white spaces. For example, we have largest number and then you accidentally just type the largest space number. So that this one is invalid already. Okay, so make sure that no white spaces there. And you have to start with a small letter or lowercase letter. But even if you make this as capital letter, your program will still work. Okay, because that is not a syntax error. But by naming convention, all variable names should start with a small letter. Next, names are case sensitive. So meaning if you have this declaration employee ID, okay, having the capital I and the capital D for ID, okay, so this one is different from this one, okay, because names are case sensitive. Okay, so C# will consider this as two different variable names. Okay, another, reserved words like C# keywords, they cannot be used as names. So for instance, the double, the int, okay, the car, the class, using, static, void, string, and a lot more keywords. Okay, these are the keywords: namespace, using, class, static. So you cannot use this. Okay, normally it appears in color blue. Okay, in if you're using the Visual Studio. Okay, so these are keywords that we cannot use as a variable names. Okay, so those are just some of the most basic, and actually it applies not only in C# but also in other programming languages, like for example Java, and then C++, okay, and another programming language. So better follow these rules. So now here's an example on how we declare variables explicitly. For instance, in line 42, we have int number 1 if you want to declare a variable number 1 having a type int, integer. And then we have a long number 2 for the data type is long, float average, a double score for floating point values. We have a bool for boolean, bool is enrolled, for example, and then a car middle name if you're planning to store, for example, your middle initial in a middle name variable. And then if you want to declare a string variables, you just have to use a string data type and then employee name, for example, as your variable name. And in the event that you have a variables having the same type, for instance, numbers 1, number 2, number 3, these are all of integers, integer data type. So instead of having int number 1, int number 2, int number 3, okay, why not just use this a shortcut, okay, declare this in one variable declaration statement separated by comma. And then just take note that every time we use or every time we declare variables, or again in naming variables, make it sure that your variable is somehow related to the value that you're going to assign to it. Okay, so make it as a descriptive as possible. Now another example, this is an example of a variable declaration with initialization. For instance, you want to declare a variable age of type integer with an initial value of 18. So this is how you do it. Okay, you just specify the data type and then the variable name and then equal sign and then the value. Okay, and then for example for float, okay, you have a score 1, okay, these are the value, comma, score 2, these are also the value, comma, and another a variable of type float, for example. Then if you have noticed that I've included the f there at the end of each value, okay, just to specify that this value, okay, is a float value. Okay, and then for example you have a car middle name and then is equal to m. Okay, so meaning the initial value of middle name is m. Okay, and take note, since this one is a character, you have to enclose it with a single quote. And then for boolean, so we have a bool is enrolled, for example the initial value is a true. Okay, and take note that as you can see, every variable declaration statement that we have here, we inserted a semicolon because this is an example of a statement. All statements in C# must end with a semicolon. It could be a variable declaration statement, initialization statement, output statement, and a lot of statements. Okay, long. So we have, you just have to proceed it, to end it with an L. Okay, just to mark that this one is a value. Okay, that the total employee is a long data type. Next, we have a double. Okay, then at the end, you just have to type there double. Although this one is not required, but it's safe to put a D there. Okay, just for you to know that these values are are declared of type double. Okay, and then string, we have student name equals, for example, Irandon Laureta. Okay, so you can now have a white space there. Okay, for as long as that one is inside of the double quotation mark. Okay, so that's how we declare a variable with initialization explicitly. So how are we going to declare display value of variables? So for instance, we have the string first name with an initial value of Loy, and then last name we have Acosta. And then if we want to display, we will just use the console.writeLine. So if you want to print out the value of first name and last name of type string, okay, so we just have to use the output statement console.writeLine. And then you just inside of the parentheses, you just have to put the variable name plus last name. Now the plus sign here is not for addition. This one is used for string concatenation. Okay, meaning the value of first name then concatenated with the value of last name. So we are expecting the output of Loy and then Acosta. So I will just use the developer PowerShell. So for example, first you have to save Control S and then developer PowerShell and then CSC, the name of our class, which is program.cs, and then press the enter key. Okay, no problem, meaning we don't see any error, so that means successful. And then we are now ready to run or execute our program. Okay, we name this one as program.cs. Okay, so program.c.exe, or short for executable file. So once you press the enter key, here's the result now, Jekloy Acosta. But actually, the easiest way is to click this one. Okay, but sometimes you need to wait a couple of seconds. Okay, so so here's the output also, Jekloy Acosta. Okay, so there you go. Now let's continue. Now, how are we going to display value variables? Okay, so we have, let me just comment this one. Let's try another example. So for example, we have declared a num1 with an initial value of 5, then num2 with an initial value of 4. So how are we going to display that one? For example, the value of num1 is num1. Okay. So if we're going to mix the string, for example here, the value of then num1 is a variable. Okay, take note, I used a single quote. Okay, so the value of num1 is, and then I enclose it with a double quote. So this one is a string plus the value of num1, which is 5. So we're expecting that the output is the value of num1 is 5. So once we click this one, as you can see, the output is, we now have the value of num1 is 5. Take note that um, the 5 here, the num1 here, the single quote is included, okay, as part of the output. Okay, so that's how we use the string concatenation operator there. Okay, let's try to add one more. What about if we have an output statement? So num1 equals, okay, take note, this one is inside of the double quote, then another string concatenation operator plus sign, the value of num1 plus, okay, so meaning if you want to concatenate another string, so you have to use another plus sign there for string concatenation, and then another string If you want to put a space there after the double quote so that if you print the num1, there is a space before printing again or concatenating again the string num2 equals and then the value of num2. Okay. And if we're going to add another output, for example, we have a console.write line num1 plus num2. Okay, so this one, don't expect that we're going to add the value of num1 and num2. Since num1 is an integer type, okay, so num1 plus num2, the result there is secret first. Okay, so let's try to run. Okay, is it 5, 4, or is it 9? Okay, so you can use actually this one again. Okay, first we need to save Control S, and then let's use the developer PowerShell. We need to compile CSC, and then program dot cs. Sorry, dot cs. Oh, wait. Okay, CSC program dot program dot cs. Okay, and then dot / program dot exe. Okay, so here's the result now. The value of num1 is 5, num1 equals 5, and then the result is 5 and 4 is 9. Num1 plus num2. Okay. It's because we don't have any string in between. So the output is automatically, this one is an integer. So the result of a plus sign here is, the functionality of plus sign here is addition, not um, so now let us try to run this one. Let's try to compile first. CSC program dot cs. Okay, and then let's try to run dot / and the name of our file program dot exe. Then press the enter key. So here's the output now. Again, so let's try to analyze. We have the value. Okay, just have to put it here. Let's try to compare. Okay, the value of num1 is, take note that the output is that the role of plus sign here is for string concatenation. So the value of num1 is 5. And then in here, again, still is string concatenations because we have a string. We have a double quote here, so in between. So that is why the output is we just display the num1 a string equal sign, and then the value of num1, which is 5, the value of num2, which is 4. Okay, and then line number 3 is a different thing because we use plus here, but take note, since num1 and num2 were declared of type integer, so the role of plus sign here is for addition operator and not for string concatenation anymore. Okay, unless we if we put an empty string here. Okay, later we will change that. Okay, for now, just bear in mind that when you put a num1 plus a num2 there, okay, without any without a string or double quote there, okay, so we will add those numbers if that variable is an integer. Okay, another num1 concatenated with num2 is, so here we go, so these are strings plus the value of num1 plus num2. Okay, so here's a good example. Take note that this one is a string, and then we have a plus sign here, and then num1. So don't be confused with this one. Okay, the rule here is that if there is a string, if you can see a double quote there, okay, meaning there's a string there. Okay, automatically this plus sign will act as a concatenation operator and not as addition. Okay, so that is why if we're going to see the result here, okay, the output here is the sum of num1 and num2 is still 9. Ooh. Yes, this one is correct because num1 concatenated with num2, as you can see here, this one, here's the result, is 5, 4, not 9. Okay, don't be confused with that. num1 plus num2, okay, normally we see this as if you want to add num1 and num2, so the result is 9, but actually it's not. Once you concatenate this integer variables with a string, automatically this 2 will become a string. I mean, temporarily, we converted the num1 and num2 to string, okay, by using this one. So the output, that's why the result is 5, 4, and not 9. Okay, but if you want to force that before we print out the num1 and num2, we need to perform the addition. So here's the way to do it. Okay, you just have to put that inside of the parentheses, so that you mean that we need to add first before we print, before we concatenate the result of num1 and num2, the sum of num1 and num2 to this string. Okay, so that the output now is 9. Now we can also declare a constant variable in C sharp. Okay, when we mean constant, for example, if we have a work week and then we declare this as a constant variable having a value of 40, we cannot change that value anymore. Okay, meaning if, for example, after this statement in line number 80, and then you have another statement, work week equals 50, for example. So we're trying to change the value of work week that is declared as a constant integer variable. Okay, so once we try to run, okay, expect the this type of out error. Okay, so we just have to wait for a couple of seconds. Okay, and then we now have an error here that the left hand side of an assignment must be a variable property of index. Okay, so we cannot, so this is an example of an error. Okay, that meaning since this one is declared of type integer as a constant variable, so we cannot change that anymore. Okay, that's the use of const keyword there. As I've said before, we can, every time we use a variable, we need to declare it explicitly, right? But in C sharp, in version 3.0, okay, it introduced this keyword, the var keyword, okay, wherein we can have a variable declaration, for example, number, which is equals to 5, okay, without using an int. But actually, this number is now an integer a variable because of its value. So meaning the data type of a certain variable, okay, once we use the var keyword here, okay, depends on the value. Okay, if you assign a number, for example, 5, since 5 is an integer value, so automatically this variable number will become an integer variable. Let's try. For example, this one is 5.8. Okay, so as you can see, once we assign 5.8 to a number, so number now will become a double, for example, data type, because that's the default. Okay, or if you specify, for example, f there, so the variable number is now a float uh, variable. Okay, that's the advantage of using var. So by having this, okay, this is a type of a variable declarations. We already declared it implicitly. Okay, it depends on the value. Okay, so like for example, if you have this variable declaration, okay, so after declaring, so this one is has no value. Okay, we can just specify its type. I mean, we can only see the type of this variable once we have now the initial value. Okay, once we put, for example, number, and then we use a single character here, a, for example. So number will become a character variable. Okay, or if you want to have a name here, so this time around, number is now I mean, is now a, for example, if we use a double quote here. Okay, so I will enclose the Julian with a double quote. So the number now is a string. Okay, so that's the use of a var keyword. Another, if I use true as a value of number, so the number now is a boolean. Okay, it's a boolean variable. So that's how we use the var keyword. That's the use of var keyword there. Because in other programming language, like for example in Java, there's no such thing as a var keyword. Okay, just to give you a trivia, I mean a little bit of information. Okay, if you're not familiar with Python, in Python we don't declare it. Okay, the moment you assign a value to a variable, that's the data type of that variable. So same thing here in C sharp. So C sharp now combines that. We can declare variables explicitly, and at the same time we can declare it implicitly by having this type of keyword. It's about time to have a programming exercise. So these are the tasks that you are going to do for us to know if you've learned something from this episode. First, we are going to create a variable named the student ID and assign the value 2021-001 to it. Create a variable named student name and assign a value of Francis Balmeo to it. Number three, create a variable named gender and assign the value M to it. Create a variable named is enrolled and assign the value true to it. Create a constant variable named GPA and assign the value 95.8F to it. Create an implicitly typed variable named course and assign the value BSCS to it. Create three variables of the same type using a comma-separated list to store test scores 90, 99, and 97. And then the last number, we're going to print out or display the value of the variables in numbers 1 to 7, similar to the following sample run. So we have a student ID here, and the student name, the student gender, the course currently enrolled with the following values. So if you're ready, let's get started. Let's try to answer now. Number one, create a variable named student ID and assign the value 2021-001 to it. So student ID, we need to declare it. Since the value is 2021-001, so we can say that is an integer value. So we now have int and then the student ID equals 2021-001 and semicolon. That's the valid declaration and initialization. Okay, next, create a variable named student name and assign the value Francis Balmeo to it. So Francis Balmeo, if you're going to store a string, so we will declare a string variable named student name is equal to, put a double quote, then Francis Balmeo. Shout out to you, bro. Our new subscriber. Next, we have number three. Create a variable named gender and assign the value M to it. So M is a single character. So we will use the car data type. And then we have gender. And then we will assign M with a single quote. That's how we declare and initialize a character variable gender. Number four. Create a variable named is enrolled and assign the value true to it. So meaning this is enrolled is of type of boolean. So how are we going to declare a boolean? We just use bool is enrolled equals true, semicolon. Okay, number five, create a constant variable named GPA and assign the value 95.8F to it. So if you could remember that once we put F there, meaning to say that the variable named GPA is a floating point of data type. Since we are required to declare it constant, so we will have a const, and then we have a float, and then the GPA with a value of 95.8 F. That's how we declare a constant variable, a float, a GPA with a value of 95.8 F. So F means a float. So that's why when you over here, the GPA is of type float. Next, create an implicitly typed variable named course and assign the value BSCS to it. Okay, if you could remember again that this one, this declarations, these are um, explicitly typed variable. So when we say implicit, we use the var keyword and then the variable name. For example, we have course, and then the data type of course will depend on its value. So if we're going to assign the BSCS, meaning that is a string, so BSCS, and then the semicolon. So the course now will become what? A string. Okay, so that's the use of var. That's how we declare a implicitly typed variable. Number 7, create three variables of the same type using a comma separated list to store test scores. So for example, we have test score 1 is equal to 90 and then comma, and then test score 2, for example, we have 99 comma, and another test score 3 is equal to 97, since this is now the last variable, semicolon, and don't forget to include the data type. These are all integer data types. So we have int test score 1 90 comma test score 2 99 and test score 3 97. Okay, and the last number, the last task, we are going to print or display the value of the variables in numbers 1 to 7 similar to the following. So here's the sample run. Okay, so how are we going to display? Of course, we will be needing the console that write line output statement. So we now have, sorry, write line. Okay, so console that write line. First is the student ID. So we need to print the student ID string. So don't forget to enclose it with the double quote, student ID colon space, and then use the string concatenation operator, the plus sign, and then the value, where did we store the 2021? So we will use the variable here. So we now have student ID. Okay, so student ID. So we now have student ID and then semicolon. Okay, another output statement. We'll just have to copy this one for the student name. So student name plus student name. Okay, and then what about for the gender? We have student gender plus, and then we store that one in the gender variable, and then and that is a string variable. Okay, and a console.write line. What about for the course BSCS? So we have course, okay, plus we have a course variable, right? So we use the course variable that is of type string, and next we have boolean. So currently enrolled. So the text is currently enrolled, and then that is true. So we use is enrolled variable. Okay, is enrolled variable, and then next we have constant variable, the GPA. For example, we have, so GPA, start to type GPA plus, where did we store? In a GPA variable. And the last one for the test score. So we now have test score. Okay, test score sum. Test score sum plus, and then the sum of test score 1, 2, and then 3. So we will have, how are we going to do that? We will use the open close parenthesis, test score 1 plus test score 2. Okay, let me just put this one here. Okay, plus test score 3. Okay, and then open close parenthesis, and then we now have here. Okay, or let's try to put this all in one line. Okay, so that's it. Right line plus test score, test score, test score. Okay, here we go. Or we can just put it there. Okay, so let's try. We will use the developer PowerShell. Okay, let's clear the screen. CSC, compile program. I'm sorry, we need to save first. Control S, and then we now have sorry, program.cs. Okay, no errors, and then it's about time to run. Again, we have a program.exe. Enter. There we go. So let's try to compare. Okay, the sample run, student ID, the student name, the gender, the BSCS. Okay, currently, okay, just currently enrolled. Okay, and then GPA is 95.8 F, and then the test score, for example, here is 286. Okay, that's it. Okay, this one is currently enrolled. Currently enrolled. Okay, that's it. And that's all for today. And if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing. And as always, show your love through comments and favorites. God bless and thank you for watching.